Welcome to College Nook Podcast. This is Natalie Keller. In this episode of the podcast, I'm speaking with Kelsey Smith. Kelsey is a Business Intelligence Analyst. She's a career changer who went from completing her political science and international relations undergraduate and graduate degrees to then completing a bachelor's degree in mathematics and data science. Her academic and career journey is super fascinating. I hope you will find our conversation both fun and informative. If you enjoy these conversations, subscribe to the College Nook Podcast on Apple Podcast, Spotify, YouTube, and follow us on social media at college.nook. And now I bring you Kelsey Smith. Well, I'm here with Kelsey Smith. Hi, Kelsey.
Hi.
Thanks so much for joining me today. I think we haven't seen each other for almost a year, I feel like, since the quarantine started.
And even probably a couple of months before that. But yeah, it's been a long time.
And I'm imagining you've been working from home as well this whole time.
Yeah, I've been working from home for, I don't know how long. It's been since March, though. So, 7, 8 months or however long.
Same here. Have you even been to campus since that time?
I have. I got we have a key door, a secure door that you use a key card to get into. And you have to get one-time access to get into the building. And so I actually requested one-time access because I wanted to go pick up my keyboard from work.
Oh, yeah.
I have like a really nice mechanical keyboard that I really missed. So I went into work in sort of that administration building, and I went in on a Saturday. And maybe this isn't the questions you wanted to ask me about, but I just found this really eerie because I went up to the floor that I work on, and it's sort of a cubicle type environment, and it was really, I have to say, really bizarre. It's this like place where for 7 months nobody has walked into, and there's dust on everything, and all your things are there just the way you left them. And I came in for my keyboard, but I ended up leaving with like a box full of stuff, like of all these things that I had like a big fluffy scarf that I used as a blanket when the office got cold. And like in March, I was like, oh, we're heading into summer. I'll leave this here. I'm not going to need this. And so it was just really bizarre. And it started making me wonder, like, I wonder if the apocalypse happened, like how long it would take nature to overtake this building. But,
I know.
so yes, I've been back once.
Oh, yeah. It's funny because I feel the same way. We will be back. And I have my favorite sweater in my office that I usually wear during cold days.
Yeah.
And I'm like, maybe I should make my way to campus one of these days. But I just don't know if I want to because nobody's there and I have to ask for special permissions. I don't know if it's worth it or not.
I
We'll
was
see.
glad I did. I mean, even just I don't know, it was a bizarre experience, but I'm glad that I picked up. I mean, I feel like this is going to continue for probably quite a bit longer.
Yeah. I can see that happening for at least one more year. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
But Kelsey, really, I invited you for this conversation because I think you would be a great person to share a little bit of insight when it comes to career change. I remember when I first heard your story of your educational background, we were standing in the biology department office and we were just chatting about your educational background. And I want our listeners to kind of hear where you were before your undergraduate, master's, and where you're now. And then we'll start there because I think there's a lot we can talk about when it comes to career change and what steps you took to kind of make it happen for you.
Sure. And I'm hoping that it lagged for a second there, so I'm hoping my audio has caught up. um yeah, no, I am really excited to talk about career change. It's not something that I ever expected that I would undertake. It was a time consuming process, and I think the time commitment of it was sort of daunting at the time. But which is partially why I'm thrilled to talk about it to anybody that's considering it, especially. So yeah, happy to talk about where I started and where I ended up. was a very traditional undergraduate student. I got my first undergrad degree when I was 18, or not when I started when I was 18, graduated when I was 22, did the 4-year plan, um, and then ended up working for an organization for a couple of years. And it took a really circuitous route, but my undergrad degree was in international affairs and modern language from Georgia Tech, and I wanted to do something related to, I wasn't really sure, but something related to maybe international development, international aid, that kind of. I really loved to travel. I loved languages, and so that was my undergrad degree. And so then I worked for the Goethe Institute for a couple of years. It's sort of like it's a cultural branch, a cultural center in Germany. They have them in Germany, but they have them all around the world. There's like 140 something odd
Yeah, they have one in
institutes all over.
Ukraine too.
Yeah, exactly. And so I worked for this really cool program at the time, the Transatlantic Outreach Program. And, we were helping to educate American social studies teachers on, like, K through 12 social studies teachers on contemporary Germany, because, like, a lot of, I feel for high school teachers. I mean, they have such a limited amount of time to cover a lot of history, and there were a lot of students that were still leaving high school, maybe covering up through like World War II, and not really going much past that. Um, just for time constraints. I mean, no fault of instructors for the most part. And so the goal was to help educate American social studies teachers on how it really was. And we did study tours overseas during the summers, and really got my feet wet and my taste for education, but also travel, and educational travel, I should say. But really great program. So, but anyway, I ended up moving up to Washington D.C. for that job. I lived in Washington D.C. for a couple of years, and then finally kind of saved up my pennies and quit my job, and decided to travel for a year. And I did it cheaply. I don't want people to think that this is sort of coming from um, perspective of privilege. I mean, I worked really hard to be able to do this, and I did it really cheaply. And
Yeah.
so went to Australia to do a working holiday visa for a year, and lived in Australia and New Zealand for a little bit of time. I know I'm getting off the rails here, but so I
No, this is
one year
great.
ended up okay. So 1 year ended up turning into 2 years, ended up turning into it just kept going, and so I ended up, after Australia and New Zealand, I went through Southeast Asia for a half a year or so, and then went up through Turkey and Ukraine, and I worked while I was in Australia, which helped to sort of fund all of this as well. And I kept choosing countries that I could cheaply afford.
Hmm.
And then, kind of when I was running out of money, I ended up kind of funny story. I met a guy in a layover in an airport in Dubai, I think.
Hmm.
And I ended up chatting to this Russian guy for like a couple of hours. We both had really long layovers, and he was telling me that he was on his way back home for a vacation from Somaliland, which hadn't really heard too much about, other than without outside of the context of Somalia itself. And so we just had a good conversation. We traded email addresses and kind of kept in touch over the next year. And then from there, once I had sort of finished that year of travel that I was doing, I was sort of looking for the next thing, and I was kind of also running out of money. And he suggested, "Hey, if you're looking for something different, here's a school, here's a boarding school that I work for in Somaliland, and if you're interested, take a look." So I did, and I took a look, and I applied. I actually applied to be a. It's funny when I look back on this how all of this is interrelated, and I didn't know it at the time. But I applied to be an English teacher, and I ended up going and teaching like computer skills / computer science, and then eventually mathematics. So looking back, it's so
Interesting.
much more related than I would have thought. So yeah, so then I flew to Somaliland and lived there for just under 2 years, which was, a wildly fantastic experience. Certainly a challenging place to live, but a lot of great kids that went to school there, and a really great experience overall.
Yeah.
Um, and then from there, I applied to grad school and then went and got my master's degree in Russia. So lived
Hmm.
in Russia. It was a shorter master's program, sort of a condensed program for a year.
Hmm.
Lived in Russia for a year, and then when I graduated, I moved back to the United States. Had no money at that time at all, and loans to boot. So moved back to the United States and had to find a job.
Hmm.
And that's how I ended up working for the university that I work for. Although I didn't start in the role that I kind of expected I would. I landed in Colorado because my family was here. I didn't
Hmm.
really have a home at that point. I had been gone for 5 years. And so I didn't really have a home at that point, or really a place to call home. And so, but my family was here. So it seemed like the logical place to go. Um, so I started looking for jobs in kind of what I had intended, which was international development, international aid, that kind of thing. But they don't really exist in Denver. I mean, they do, but really, if you you know,
Probably
a lot
more
of
like
the
East Coast stuff.
more like New York
Yeah.
and Washington D.C. And I had no interest in living in New York and didn't really feel like going back to Washington D.C. So I sort of shifted to my plan B, which was sort of related, is that I wanted to work with international students.
Hmm.
Because I had an awesome time, working for a boarding school, teaching international students. So it kind of seemed like a natural shift to do that here in the United States. Uh, that being said, I still really struggled to find work doing that. So I ended up doing a contract position at a university here in Denver for about half a year, and that was like with their international office, that supported their international students. But it was just a contract gig, and kind of when that was up, I was sort of searching for work the whole time,
Yeah.
and I ended up getting a not really what I intended, but I got a job for the current university that I work for as a multicultural events planner.
Mm.
And I, figured, okay, I mean, it'll get my foot in the door, and hopefully, it'll be easier to identify and find something that I'm really excited about. Once I'm in the role and doing the job,
Yeah.
and so that's where I landed. And I don't know if I should stop there before I shift
Yes.
to.
You know, I just learned a bunch of new information about you. That is so fascinating. You have such an extensive global experience that wasn't aware of. And I'm curious, when you did your undergrad and then you started to do your poli sci masters in Russia, what were the kind of the reasoning behind that? And do you feel like every time you were pursuing a passion of yours, or how did it work for you? You know?
I mean, at that stage, I had really, I was kind of addicted to living in different places, and
Mm,
the appeal of one, I was interested in doing a master's overseas because, and this is a good recommendation for anybody that's listening, is to look at master's programs overseas, because um, as much as it sounds like it could theoretically be really expensive, it's not. I mean, relative to the United States, for the most part, it's not. And so I was interested in doing a master's overseas because it was so much more affordable, even with living costs and everything. It was still so much more affordable for me to do a 1 year master's than it was for me to. I mean, we have 1 year masters in the United States too, but most of them are 2 years.
yeah.
And you end up accruing tens of $1,000s of debt. And
Yeah.
I wasn't willing, knowing that there was a good chance that I would never be in a field where I earned a lot of money.
Mhm.
I'd been working for nonprofits up until that point. So, I just wasn't willing to go six figures into debt. And so
Mhm.
that was certainly, in the back of my mind
Mhm.
as a reason to do a master's overseas. But also, given what I wanted to study and what I wanted to
Mhm.
do career wise, doing it overseas also just made a lot of sense
Yeah.
to kind of, continue that sort of global
Boost your
perspective.
professional and kind of cultural
Yeah,
experiences even more. And that makes sense.
exactly.
I was just recently talking to a couple of my friends who work and live in Europe, and it seems like education there on that undergraduate, graduate level also seems to be pretty affordable, anywhere from like 500 euros per semester to $0 or 0 cents. It's just pretty good. So I always encourage folks to keep their options open, research, and from my experience also in Russia, in Ukraine, and in some European countries, master's level degrees are usually 1 year, not two, like here.
Yeah, I was to be honest, I hate to say this as somebody who works in higher education and I love education,
Yeah,
but at that time I was so poor, and so I mean I was tired sort of at that point. I mean it had been
yeah,
like a lot of on the move for a long time. I really kind of I mean I wanted the experience, but I also wanted the piece of paper and to get it
yeah.
done. And
Get in, get
so
out.
having it be yeah,
Yeah,
and being it being 1 year was really attractive. And
absolutely.
I will say Russia ended up being a more difficult place to live than I expected it to be.
Mhm.
So
Yeah. But here you are, you're back in the US and now you are working in higher education system, right? Maybe not
yeah.
in the job that you expected right away, but it was a good start. And
Hmm.
I know that from that point on, can you share with us how you discovered what you're doing now? I know it took you a few years, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it certainly did. So, like I said, I got hired on to do multicultural events. And for the most part, I mean, it was a good job. I had a really fabulous office that I worked with, really nice people. And I really felt, supported and I mean, I really, and encouraged, and it was just a really nice place to work.
Mhm.
But what ended up happening, I mean, I will vouch, I will say that my hat goes off to anybody that does this for a career because um, event planning is exhausting, and it strikes me as something. If I had been looking at this from the outside in, well, anybody can do it. I mean, you don't really need a specialized degree to plan events. And yeah, maybe I'm right. Maybe you don't need a specialized degree, but it is so much harder than I think a lot of people give credit for. It was just exhausting, I mean, when you're doing 12, 13-hour days on an event day itself. And as a introvert, in the sense that I recharge my batteries by not talking to people and by being at home.
Yeah.
Um, it was a job that constantly needed you to talk to people and
Mhm.
constantly needed interaction, and it was just really taxing. Um, but what ended up happening was, so I ended up having to do, it was a sort of, I was a one-stop shop for events, so I had to do everything from the actual like ordering food to planning layouts to creating like RSVP things and whatever. And so um, but what ended up happening was, because I ended up having to build basic websites to actually advertise the events, it slowly kind of shifted into me getting into like web analytics, um, and then eventually what the university, I mean, unrelated to what I was doing at all, the university ended up implementing, they hired on a couple folks to start their enterprise data warehouse. And because I was sort of in a dean's office at that time, I was really interested in just sitting in on the meetings. I'd love to hear what you guys are, what you're doing. And so I ended up starting to go to these meetings. And for those listening, the EDW, the Enterprise Data Warehouse, it was sort of started by a team in the IT world on campus, and they really, their job was to sort of wrangle a whole bunch of data from the university's database system into digestible reports for people. And they weren't. the goal isn't for the data warehouse to do analytics. They're not doing predictive algorithms or anything like that. It's really just to sort of get the data from the database into like digestible reports for anybody to sort of log in and take a look at.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I started sitting in on those meetings, and it was like this. I mean, I think the wheels really started turning then.
Hmm.
And I just started to get way more into it, and then it was like, recently the university had modified their, oh, what do you call it, the employee tuition program,
Hmm.
and they made it, they sort of buffed it up a whole lot, and made it so you could take, 9 credit hours a semester, free of charge tuition wise. And you still have to pay the fees, but still it's a bargain. And so once they started to do that, and like I said, the wheels were kind of turning, and I thought, you know what, maybe I'll take a like an intro to statistics class and just see if I like it, and just kind of give it a shot. I did it in the summer, so it was sort of my low season for work, and that's
Yeah.
that's how it sort of started.
So, and at that point, have you started having conversations with your friends, family, mentors about this interest of yours?
Um, I mean, maybe I like, I talked to my parents about how, I don't want to say I was unhappy at my job, but I knew that my job wasn't where I want. This is certainly not what I wanted to do for the next 40 years of my life.
Yeah.
And so, I talked to my parents about that. You and I have a communal, or a common friend, Liz. I chatted to her because I knew that she had had been working on a second degree, for a long time while working full time. And so, but really outside of that, not many people. I'd done some cursory Googling, but
Hmm.
that's about it.
Okay. So at that point, you have tried Intro to Stats as your first class. And
Yeah.
that led you into a totally new kind of pathway with pursuing a math degree and data science focus, um, which then brings you into your role of business analytics. So this is the focus that I would like to kind of talk about more because I think going from a humanities degree, political science and social science, that type of stuff, international relations, to something STEM related must have been maybe daunting, maybe challenging. I just want to hear your story and how you kind of ended up pursuing this and committing to this degree, um, kind of long term, right?
Yeah. It's funny you say committing to this degree. I'm not sure I was committed at the beginning, I think I figured, oh, this might be really challenging to work full time and go to school. So I'm just,
Yeah.
I'm going to try intro to stats. And that kind of went all right. And so then I was like, well, I'm just going to try the next class. And so it was all like, with the understanding that, oh, I could probably stop at any time if this becomes overwhelming. But what ended up happening, of course, was that once I got going in it, it was like, oh yeah, like, yeah, this is the career. Like, this is, I would be so much, I could actually, I got excited because I actually felt like I found something that I could see myself doing for the next couple decades of my life.
Yeah.
And I feel super fortunate about that because I don't feel like, or I do feel like, I think there's a lot of people that, never find something that they really want to stick with for a long time. And um, so I sort of recognize my privilege in that sense, and that certainly
Hmm.
helped keep me going.
Yeah.
Um,
So, I mean, at what point in time did it happen for you? I'm just curious because, my kind of journey with exploration of computer science and data science a little
yeah,
bit. And just like you, I took advantage of the tuition benefit and I have taken Calculus 1, Computer Science 1, Data
yeah,
Science 1, very intro type classes. And for me, and I was honest with you when I said it wasn't fun enough. Like when I think about calculus, yeah, I can do this all day, every day, the math itself. But when it came to programming or wrestling with data itself, like databases or data sets, I was like, that's just not very exciting to me. And that's okay, right? But taking those exploratory classes definitely helped me figure that
Oh
out.
yeah.
And that's just so cool because I work with a lot of students who are in their first year and they panic and they think, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? What am I going to major in? They put so much pressure on themselves. And for good reason, like it's a big investment of their
Yeah.
money, of their resources, of their time. So that's understandable. But I think what the US educational system has to offer is that your ability to change your mind a little bit or a lot, I don't know. And so in this particular case, you're taking a class or two and you're exploring and further, and I want to maybe get a sense of what helped you confirm in your mind that this was it. Like what kind of things really aligned? Was it a class? Was it a task or a homework assignment? I'm just curious. So, because I think that will help other students who are exploring figure out what should I be searching for or looking for to confirm that this is my path. I don't know.
Yeah, and it's tricky because that's probably going to be different for every student. I just know that once I started taking math classes and sort of the further along I got in math classes, the more I realized how much I love math.
Mhm.
I've even, I mean, this is a separate thing that I won't go into right now, but I've considered doing another, master's degree sort of specifically related to data science. And there's lots of degree programs that you can choose from out there if you want to go a business analytics master's or a data science master's or a statistics master's, or I mean, there's sort of different avenues that you can take. And the more I realized I was not interested in like MBAs with business analytics concentrations or something like that. I wasn't interested in that because that's, I mean, they're great. It's really important too. But I love the math, and so those were more business focused. And if I ever did another degree, it would hands down be like a postgraduate mathematics degree of some kind, probability statistics, whatever. And I think part of what I ended up just loving about it was I really loved the problem solving. I mean, I really enjoy the process of being handed a math problem and sitting down and trying to figure out the logic. And um, if once I sort of dawned on me that the logic puzzles were what I really loved. I mean, that is, I feel like, what data science and
Mhm.
data analytics sort of is. How can we solve problems in sort of a logical fashion? How can we use data to help us solve problems? And it's a way more creative field than people I think give it credit for. In a sense, it's um, certainly maybe at the sort of entry level, you're really just doing some descriptive pulls of data, and so it's not maybe as engaging.
Mhm.
But once you get further along, and I'm still in the process of getting further along, but you really do see how creative a field it is. It's a really cool balance between uh, and this is what made the field attractive to me. But it's a really cool balance between, having to be good at math, a little bit of coding, but also being able to talk to people, to present to people, to be able to, convey your ideas in a understandable and clear fashion. So it's a
Yeah.
really cool mix to me of abilities, and I don't think that it's necessarily something that everybody uh, wants to do or really feels comfortable doing. I mean, there's a lot of really brilliant engineers out there that might not love to go and stand in front of a boardroom or something like that and present their findings, and probably vice versa. There's probably a lot of really engaging speakers that it's their worst nightmare to go sit in front of a computer for 8 hours a day and you know um, code whatever they need, whatever it is. But
Yeah.
so I mean, it's just a neat balance. And
Yeah.
I mentioned that I'm an introvert, but I like to describe myself as an extroverted introvert. I like to talk to people, but I don't want to talk to people for 40 hours a week.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and you see, based on what I described to you, I stopped at that level of I don't want to sit at my computer, meaning coding or working with data sets for 8 hours a day. And you just shared with me that that might be your entry level, but then it goes beyond that, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. But I mean, that being said, though, I do like sitting in front of my computer, and I mean, I do like wrangling data set. I mean, maybe I won't enjoy it so much in 10 years, let's say, when my abilities using Python or R or whatever are, when it's so commonplace and I don't have to think about it anymore, and it becomes really mundane and tedious. Like maybe I won't
Yeah.
appreciate it then, but for right now, there's still a lot I have to learn, and there's still a lot of uh, steps I need to take in like the actual coding world. And so for me, that's all still logic puzzles. It's like, okay, I know that this is possible. How do I do this?
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
who knows?
And it's interesting to me also to see how you were able to get further along in your math degree and then switch into an entry level business analyst position. Can you share a little bit of that? Because I think a lot of times people are just so afraid to change their career with this idea of, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to start from the bottom again, and it's scary, and I'm going to be a novice again. So, can you share a little bit of insight there?
Yeah. Okay. So I had all of these thoughts. I had all those. I have to say, I mean, as much as being doing events as a career was not necessarily where I wanted to end up, I was good at it. I was really good at it, and so I enjoy being good at my job. And I have a little
Hmm.
bit of a competitive nature, and I want to be
Hmm.
better than everybody else, and I want to be
Hmm.
I want to be the best event planner, whatever it is.
Yeah, yeah.
So I was good at my job, and the prospect of starting over in a new field, especially a mathematics slash coding slash, I mean, a lot of really sort of technical things that especially can be daunting for anybody, but oftentimes can be even maybe slightly more daunting for women sometimes. Yeah, it was sort of uncomfortable. I was sort of uncomfortable with the idea that I'm going to suck at my job for a while. I'm going to not be the best, and I want to be the best. So yeah, that idea was a challenge, but I also knew that the longer I wait to do it, the harder it's going to be. I mean, if I mean, I certainly encourage anybody that wants to make a career change. I don't care how old you are, do it. Like, do it. If it's going to make you happier as a person, you should absolutely do it. I don't care if you're 20 years old or you're 60. But I do think that the longer you wait, the harder it's going to be, and the less time you have to work in the field that you want to be in. Um, so I mean, it was sort of like a you know not sink or swim, just you got to get up and do it. And I did. I had this. I got really really fortunate, and I am thank my lucky stars every day that I was able to sort of luck into the job that I did. And this is a testament to anybody wherever you're working. Make sure you talk to people. And I know the whole concept of like networking is sort of, you know, I don't know, it's kitschy and what I don't know, cheesy and kind of an annoying thing for people to tell you to do. But that is kind of how it worked out for me. I ended up getting to know this girl that sat in on the same EDW meetings as I did, and she was on the business intelligence team. I think at the time I didn't even know what department she was from. I just knew that she sat in on those meetings, and we chatted every so often, uh, and I asked her questions every now and again. But long story short, she I saw her at an event one day, and we were just chatting about things, and I was telling her about, oh yeah, I've gone back to school, I'm working on this math degree. And she just looked at me and said, well, we have an opening or that's up right now. And it was like, I did not know. So and that was kind of, the rest is history from there. But I mean, I was lucky. I 100% was absolutely lucky. So, but I was lucky uh, while also trying to give my own self credit where credit is due too. I mean, I tried really hard, and I think it was really important to make those steps, like sitting in on those EDW meetings as an example,
Mhm.
had nothing to do with my job. I just was interested, and that's how I got to know people. And
Yeah. Well, there's very, I mean, I'm an academic advisor, but I am now getting to realization that networking is essential in the US. And I was like, maybe you can just be good at what you're doing and do just fine. Yes, probably, but you will have to most likely work even harder for those types of opportunities. And being an introvert, I don't like that either. Reaching out to people that I don't even know and asking them questions or trying to sell myself. Like, I just hate the idea of it. And so recently I was organizing a career panel for my computer science students, and we had industry experts who are hiring managers for years now. And they say, well, first of all, internship is a good way to get in. Second of all, go talk to your teachers and professors. They might know of some openings in the area. And finally, take advantage of informational interviews. Like if you know a person or if you know a company that you want to work for or explore the idea of working for them, reach out to them. From the 5 to 10 people that you will reach out to, let's say 2 or 3 respond. That's already better than nothing. And Kelsey, I know I'm going to share with you my recent experience with informational interviews. Like literally 2 3 weeks ago, I talked to some people in the industry because I have this interest in potentially doing a career change. I've been thinking about it for 4 years now, let's be honest. And that's okay, right? I'm still searching for that
yeah,
right
absolutely.
niche. And I learned that from 5 people, 3 responded. I learned so much more than I knew before. And I learned that some companies even have these referral links that you can apply through, and that puts you on top of the application kind of applicant
Yeah.
list. So I'm just blown away with this whole networking, and I would just want to encourage folks that even if you feel uncomfortable, you have to kind of bypass that a little bit. And
I will. This is unrelated to the data science or the business analytics, whatever that that I'm currently in. But I did an informational interview that I think kind of got my foot in the door. I ended up, when I wanted to work with international students, I reached out to somebody at the university that I did the contract job for. I reached out to somebody in their office, and I just asked, hey, um, would you ever have, 10 minutes to chat to me? Can I buy you a cup of coffee, and can I just pick your brain on how you ended up where you are? This is what I've been doing. It's just a short email. I didn't want to, write a novella and have them just automatically delete it. And she was like, "Yeah, come on in. I'm happy to chat to you." And so I ended up going in, and informational interviews are 1,000 times easier than an actual interview because again, they're just a conversation. You get to just
yeah,
say like, "Hey, what was your path to getting where you are? You have any thoughts or recommendations on what I could do to?" And it's low pressure for them. They don't feel like you're trying to weasel your way in necessarily and try and get a job or something. It's just you asking what their path was, and um, it was a really nice conversation. I didn't think too much about it, but when the contract gig ended up getting posted, um, I applied for it and said, I chatted to so and so, and I ended up getting the job. And I'm certain that that had something to do with it. So I
yeah,
highly recommend. It's even for people that might not feel comfortable asking for something like that. It's a pretty easy thing to do in the grand scheme of things, because it is so low pressure.
absolutely.
So
Yeah, I would encourage students to think about that. as soon as they start their educational journey, if they're, especially if they're deciding between different things, right? Because we're talking about, from networking's perspective, it's one thing. You're getting your word, kind of your name out there, making connections. That's one thing. But secondly, genuinely getting to know what these people are doing. And in my case, that was the case. You know, you have this title that it's called engagement manager. What does that mean exactly? How did you
Yeah.
get to this position? Like, what do you do? It's like the secret world of all these different titles that is unknown.
Yeah.
Same for students, you know. So I think it's really important to reach out and have these conversations.
Yeah.
Did
And
you?
people, oh, sorry, go ahead. No, I was just gonna say people love to talk about themselves.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's and they're usually willing to tell you in a setting like that what they really like about their job, but also what they don't. And when you're trying to figure out what you want to do for a career, I mean, that's incredibly invaluable to know. Um, what people recommend and don't recommend, and what they like and don't like.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, when you think about, you know, your current position, do you wish sometimes that you discovered math earlier in your life?
Um, I don't know. I kind of I oscillate back and forth on that one. Certainly, yeah, it would be nice in a way that I had figured this out earlier, and you maybe it would already be 5-10 years deep in experience in the field that I want to be in. But looking back, I mean, I don't regret any of the experiences I had. I mean, if I had figured this out, let's say when I was 21 years old, would I have gone to Somalia for 2 years? Would I have gone and gotten a master's in Russia? Would I have gone and done the things that I've done? Probably not. And who's to say I ever would have figured it out necessarily without taking the path that I did? I mean, I think that there's a lot to be said for people working in jobs to figure out what they don't like.
Hmm.
I will, yeah, I mean, there's a lot to be said for that. I mean, I think it's really valuable for you to try things and realize, oh, I don't like this for whatever reason, to
Yeah.
help you find what you do like. And so,
Hmm.
you know, uh, sometimes I have a little bit of a desire. I wish I had found it earlier, but for the most part, I would, if I had to answer that, I would say no. I'm glad that I took the path that I did. I feel like I've been really, really fortunate to have gone the places I've gone to and seen the things that I've seen. And I recognize my privilege for being able to have done all that. And so I'm happy that with the path that I took.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I always think about my kind of educational journey too, because I first started as an elementary education teacher. So I
Yeah.
went that path, kind of knowing that I don't want to be an elementary school teacher, but I didn't know what else I can do. And then English came about. I was like, oh my gosh, linguistics. I love the language and I want to learn the inside of it and grammar structures and vocabulary.
Yeah.
So I went that route. And that's something I wanted to do. And then life happens, right? I had to move, reconsider all of my career options. And here I am in higher education, still trying to find what's next for me. And I'm curious if, I mean, sometimes I have this idea of like, oh, Natalie, just be done already exploring. But I think it's okay to keep exploring the new path, especially if I feel like I already accomplished whatever I could within my current sort of role, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so that's kind of something else I was going to mention is that I know that I talked about um, doing things that you don't necessarily like to find the things that you do like, but that's not always the case too. I mean, you can be in a role that you enjoy, and you enjoy it, and you're good at it, and you enjoy the learning process of it for X number of years, but you might get to a point where you're just kind of ready to move on and do something
Mm.
different. And like, that's okay too. You don't have to be unhappy to want to make a career change. You can be perfectly happy and still want to make a career change just to
Yeah.
keep learning and keep growing as a person.
Yeah. Keep things interesting.
keep things
That's
interesting.
how it is for me. Yeah, lifelong learning just gets the best of me, I think.
Yeah,
Um,
and I mean, I think that's why a lot of people end up in higher education is they have a
mm,
love of education, and that goes for themselves too, and it's part of the reason why I'm so like thrilled to be in the role that I'm in is because I I feel like I've touched the tip of the iceberg, and I like 100% see how much there is to learn, and I think that I will be sort of satiated for a really long time to come, because there is so much to get better at.
mhm. And how long have you been in this position now?
Um, I guess only about 2 years or so, I think.
2 years.
So it hasn't been too terribly long. And so, I mean, knowing where I'm at, I mean, I have a certainly the more you learn, the more you learn you don't know.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
so, every day that I'm in my job, somebody will mention something in passing, and it's like, oh, like I literally have a whiteboard over here right now with like career to do list, and
Uh-huh.
it's all things uh, that I've heard in passing, or just things that I need to learn. I want to learn. I mean, and get
Yeah.
better at. So
Yeah. And that's another thing I wanted to point out is that there are certain fields like, computer science, business analytics that if you are not a lifelong learner, I don't think that would be necessarily the best field for you, just because it keeps evolving and changing and new tools
yeah,
and technologies and software. It's like never ending. But you are kind of you enjoy the process of learning new things, and so
I
that's
do.
the really good fit for you. um, and I try to emphasize to students that college, you think you're done with college and then you can just work. No, it's just the beginning. Like you said, tip of the iceberg. College is just teaching you how to learn, so then when you get a job in computer science or data science or whatever it is in tech world, you just keep learning. That's kind of the field that we're in, I feel like. I don't know, but
Yeah, no, you're right.
mhm.
You're right.
Um, so I feel like we had a really nice kind of overview of what kind of steps you took to make this career change possible for yourself, and recognizing all of the kind of lucky moments and also the effort that you put in and opportunities that you took and explored and found. And before I let my guests go, one thing that I want to ask you is, when you reflect back on your educational kind of pathway and journey, is there something that you can identify as the most impactful that either happened to you, or whether it's a person, experience, anything like that, whether it's undergraduate, your first one, or current, whatever it is? Like when you think about educational journey, what was most impactful for you, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah, I that's a hard question, because I didn't have like a eureka moment. I didn't. I mean, this was a very slow, very sort of snowball esque kind of realization.
Hmm.
And it wasn't until I started taking math classes that it sort of dawned on me that this is absolutely the right path. Um, so yeah, I mean, I never talked to somebody that was like, um, I mean, I talked to everybody that I could get my hands on, but I never, none of them ever sort of offered. I think they were all just confirming something that I already sort of had in the back of my, something that I had in the back of my mind, that this was the right way to go.
Hmm.
I picked the brain of anybody that I could possibly, but I mean, I think really it came down to like a personal decision. And and that just took time. It just took a lot of time, and kind of a slow process. And I will say, for anybody that's listening again, that if you're considering going back to school as an adult, or my sort of ending advice, I suppose, not that you didn't ask me for advice necessarily, but this, I do feel like this is worthwhile to share with folks, is like it was really hard. It was really hard, and I fully understand that I am coming from an easier place than many. I mean, I don't have kids. I don't, there's a lot of things that made it easier for me than it would be for other people. And I think I was surprised at how hard it was to balance a 40 plus hour a week job and going to school at the same time. But it was worth it. Like it was hands down, no questions asked, worth it. And I do think, I work for an institution that caters to a lot of non-traditional students, students that are going back to school and getting other degrees. And I think I was really blown away by the ambition of the adult learners. I mean, I remember stressing out immensely, at 19 years old if I, did poorly on a test or something like that. And while it was really hard to balance work and education, you certainly treat it differently. You are so much better at like time management, because I know that I have a meeting that goes until 5 p.m. and I know that my class starts at 5:30, so I've got X number of minutes to do. I mean, you're just I don't know, you're better, you're more well-rounded by that point. And it's just, I don't think I knew an adult that was in any of my classes that wasn't like an A plus student. I mean, they did
Hmm.
fabulous in all of their classes, all of their tests. They knew what they wanted, and they were there to get it done.
Hmm.
And I so encourage anybody that wants to make a change to just do it. And it might be hard for a time, but if it takes you 6 years to get through a second degree, if that's what you want to do, if you opted not to do that, you know what else is going to happen in 6 years? Like 6 years will have passed. So I mean,
Yeah.
time will pass regardless. And so
Yeah. Yeah.
anyway, that I know that was
Absolutely.
a little um,
No,
segue away from your question, but
I'm almost feeling like you're saying these words to me. I'm gonna take your advice and do something about it.
but I also you have been, I mean, by taking classes and figuring out whether is something that you want to pursue, you have been. And it doesn't
Hmm.
matter if it takes somebody 2 years to do it or if it takes somebody 10 years to do it. I mean,
Right.
it's great that you're pursuing something.
Hmm. Agreed. Well, thanks so much for this awesome conversation. I really appreciate it. And I'm sure our listeners will take a lot out of it. At some point in time, I hope we'll have you again here where we can talk really specifically about business analytics as the profession itself. Because again, I feel like there is just so many different components to all of these different jobs and careers that it's difficult to navigate if you are a first year student or even if you are a career changer. Like, what exactly do you do in your role? So we'll talk about it next time. Until then.
Perfect.